All right. I'm excited to be here, and not just because we're going to dinner tonight now. That's good, right? Ancient studies. I love being on campus here. Got in last night after the plane troubles, walked around, grabbed some dinner, watched a little volleyball. It's a blessing to be back on campus with you guys. I love it here. I love to see all the SAGU shirts. I'm from Penn State, and we see a lot of Penn State shirts on campus. Yeah, I don't know who's... Okay. But to see you guys wearing your shirts and to own this place and be proud of it, I love seeing that. I just want to introduce myself a little bit so you know where I'm coming from. What's this guy from Penn State doing here talking to us about archaeology, the Bible? What's going on? Well, my story is that I started out at Central Bible College and accidentally took Greek and Hebrew, which is a dangerous path. And I started to fall in love with the languages, so I ended up doing a master's in biblical languages at Gordon-Conwell Theological Seminary. From there, I knew that there was something going on in the ancient world that I wanted to understand. I knew that there were these peoples, that there was this archaeology, that there was a way we could understand the biblical world better. So I applied to a bunch of places, and the place that I ended up is Penn State in the history department. So technically, I study ancient history, but I specialize in the archaeology and the texts of the ancient Near East. So that's basically, I study the Old Testament, and I study the archaeology that surrounds the Old Testament. So it's a really cool job. I love what I do, and I love to get to share that with people. One of the things I want to say before we start this is I know we're recording it, and so the thing with archaeology is that it's always changing. So I have no idea how long this is going to be up. This is an older topic, so it should be fairly stable, but stuff changes all the time. So people in the future, if you're watching this, you've been notified. I'm not wrong. I'm just not as right as we used to be, or something like that. Okay. So today, I want to talk to you about Judah in crisis, and I titled this "The Archaeology of 701 BC." It could have been titled so many things. This could have been the archaeology of ancient warfare. Okay, when I was thinking about the topics, like, what can everybody use that's somewhat exciting, that has pretty pictures, what can we do? So there's a little bit of warfare. So if you like battles and Lord of the Rings and big siege towers, okay, we're in the right place. This is good. If you like college football, there's a little, I figured that would be okay. This is Texas. It's like God, Texas, and college football, right? Or football. Some of those are interchangeable. I don't know the order. Okay. If you like fashion and makeup, this is not the right lecture, okay? But there will be drama, so, all right. So what are we doing today? This is a little bit of everything. This is kind of how I describe myself to you, that I do a little bit of history, a little bit of Bible, and a little bit of archaeology. Today we're going to kind of look at the story. What sets up this critical time in biblical history? And then how does the Bible inform and confirm this political history? We see a lot of stuff happening here. And then finally, there's an archaeological benefit that's happening here, that people that don't even care about the Bible actually get something out of this topic. So really today, we want to look at 701 BC and figure out why this is a critical turning point. We want to look at how the Bible and archaeology and these other ancient Near Eastern texts all represent different voices in the conversation and what they can contribute. And then really understanding how getting a picture of this time in history can help us understand other biblical texts from the same time. This is a little washed out, but I figured if we have to start with a story, we should start at a campfire, because campfires are the perfect vehicle for storytelling. So come gather around my campfire. It's a cool Texas evening, if those exist. And we're sitting next to a fire, so there's some warmth. Okay? And think with me as we walk through the olive groves of Israel. Now, the region we're talking about today is the Shephelah, which, if we look at a map of Israel, this is a 3D relief. You can see right here, Lachish is on this border between a coastal plain and the big mountain hills. They call them mountains. They're huge hills. Okay? But that space in between is what we call the Shvela, and it's these gentle rolling hills. And this is a really fertile region. One of the things that grows there, olives. We have lots of grapes also. So this is a wine and olive oil producing region. As you walk through these olive groves, this towering beast of a city emerges. If you can see, this is what we call a tell. It's a giant city mound, city on top of city, and it gets its shape from the giant fortification walls. Around it, if you can see this, we have rows of grapes from the vineyards. The countryside around is surrounded by olive oil producing, or olive trees, even to this day. So this is something that happened in antiquity and even up till now. We have to talk about chronology a little bit because this is archaeology, and you have to understand how things accumulate. So it's like you have a busy week at school, you change your outfit, you throw it on the floor, right? Then the next day you do the same thing, you throw another one on there. What ends up happening by the end of the week is you have a pile, and the oldest stuff is always on the bottom, right? So what happens when you have a giant city like this, it's put there for a reason. Maybe it's because of the water, because of the land, because it overlooks a strategic viewpoint. So they're constantly resettled, and over time, you build up this kind of height. What we want to talk about today, we could talk about all of these at the site of Lachish. But the one that really matters is up here. This is the Iron Two. That's what archaeologists call it. For us, this is a time when a lot of events of the Bible happen. If you're keeping score, this is after the Garden of Eden, right? This is after Moses. This is after Solomon. Is it after Uzziah? Okay. There's a trick question in there. Okay. Uzziah is going to be in here. David is going to be the start of this kind of. The end of it is obviously we're getting down to the prophet Jeremiah. The time period that we're really going to talk about today, 701 BC, this is about the time of King Hezekiah, okay? So that's where we're at. We're after all the good Elijah and Elisha, but we're before this Babylonian exile, the stuff that you hear about in class. Now, to set the stage for this, we have to understand the politics a little bit. And everything that happens in 701 starts a lot earlier. I told you there would be college football. The thing you have to understand is that at this time, we have a bunch of independent states. We have Israel in the north, you know that one. We have Judah in the south. We have the Philistines. We have Moab. And what's happening as all these states exist and have their own boundaries is we have the Assyrian Empire. I like to think of the Assyrian Empire as Texas because they're huge, they're good at a lot of things, and they're not afraid to tell people that. And so what happens at this time, during the 8th century, is the Assyrian Empire is going from this red area, which has already expanded. I mean, if you think about Assyria, the heartland is here around Nineveh, and it's expanding and it's dropping all the way down the coast, and eventually it will encompass this light gray area that you can see, right? So with this pressure coming and building, what happens here? Well, one of the main themes in ancient Near Eastern history is how this part of the world reacts to this part. And one of the things that they like to do is form coalitions. We've got a bunch of little states here. How are we going to stand up to Assyria, right? And so what they do is they form coalitions and they try to fight against them. So in the 730s, Israel and Philistia and Moab, they're trying to form this coalition. They say, everybody, let's get together. We're going to fight against Assyria. We're going to resist this. They try to get Judah in on it, and Judah says, no thanks. We're not really into foreign alliances. Like, this isn't a good idea. And what happens is that these other guys team up on Judah and start harassing them. We know this as the Syro-Ephraimite conflict. That's something that you'll hear this referred to as. And what happens is, as they start harassing Judah, and Judah says, no, we're staying out of this, Judah makes the decision to call up Assyria and say, would you come deal with this? And what happens is King Ahaz gets in cahoots, basically, with Assyria, and Assyria comes and starts wiping people off the map. And so this will be the beginning of the end for the kingdom of Israel. You know from classes that about 722, things really come to an end here. But in the 730s, they take their first serious blow, and they're reduced to basically just a chunk of what they formerly were. So that solves the problem temporarily, but Judah is now not friends with Assyria. They're on the payroll. So they're now making annual tributes to Assyria for this protection that they have supposedly bought. So they're spared at this time, and it's not a big deal. The way this is like college football is that every time these things happen, it's kind of like conference realignment, right? Nobody likes conference realignment. The Big Ten decides that they're going to flirt with Nebraska to see if they can draw out Notre Dame. Doesn't work. Missouri says, no, we're pretty too. Big Ten's like, no, you're not. They say, okay, we're offended. And so then they try to pretend like they belong to the SEC, and people start bolting, right? In the background of this, you have Texas wants its own TV channel because it's Texas, right? Colorado splits, Nebraska splits, Big 12 is shrinking. Then you have other teams bailing for the SEC. Quick, we're going to pick up. So that's what's happening. It's this shuffling and wheeling and dealing. You see the coming thing, and it's all driven by fear. And in the end, Judah makes a deal. They get their TV rights. They're happy. But they sell out in a big way. And that's going to become a problem. It's fine right now, and it's going to be fine for the next king when Sargon is in charge of Assyria. But we get to 705, and there's a change at the top of Assyria. And a new king comes on the scene, and his name is Sennacherib. Now, Hezekiah knows this is going to be a problem. There's something that's not right. We don't know what it is. We don't know exactly why he's going to rebel. But for some reason, they know things aren't going to work out in this nice deal that we had struck earlier. So once we get to 705, we see some things changing in the country. The end of the 8th century is a time of buildup for much of Judah. If you recall our seminar last year, just real quick, how many were here for the talks last year? Okay, we won't use those jokes again. If you recall last year, we talked a little bit about Jerusalem. And in Jerusalem in the time of David, it's kind of spread down this spur of a hill. But in the 8th century, especially after Israel collapses, we have an influx of people into Jerusalem. And what happens is this old spur of a hill right here is expanded and goes all the way out to encompass, there's a mall over here now. But it wraps out this direction, okay? And so Jerusalem undergoes serious improvement. Some of it is partially before this Assyrian change, but there's a lot of fortifications that happen, refortifying certain areas. And we go back to this. Up here, there's a portion of wall, we call it the broad wall. This one's for Christopher because he wanted to see it. I'll step out of the way. This wall is 21 feet across at this portion, and this is a part of the fortifications that are happening at Jerusalem. The biblical text tells 2 Kings 20, as for the other events of Hezekiah's reign, all his achievements and how he made the pool and the tunnel by which he brought water into the city, are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Judah? Tunnel? What are we talking about? He builds a tunnel for water? Yeah, he does. There were existing tunnels that channeled the water, but in order to protect the water supply, Hezekiah commissioned that a new tunnel be carved out underneath Jerusalem, basically, down to the Pool of Siloam. We call this the Siloam Tunnel or Hezekiah's Tunnel. And if you go to Israel, either in the spring with the trip here, if you come dig with us in the summer, this is what the tunnel looks like, a tunnel, right? It's carved limestone, and water flows through the bottom. And Christopher was just telling me a little bit ago that he had the chance to go through this before they regulated the water flow, which was when the water was much higher, and they gave you a candle. Now they sell little keychain LED flashlights, and it runs at your ankles. But if you go to Jerusalem, this is the true Indiana Jones experience. Like, you're walking through a tunnel that was carved by people. One of the greatest things about this is the dedicatory inscription that the workers put up right at the halfway point. This is like a true joining of the railroad moment. The way they did it is they started digging from both directions, and the diggers actually met in the middle. And that's what this inscription describes, is that the diggers met in the middle and they broke through and the water flowed through. So just another really neat thing that's happening leading up to this. It's Hezekiah who blocked up the outlet of the Gihon and channeled the water down. There it is in Chronicles. Later it talks about more blocking up of water and redirecting. So all of this is in Chronicles makes it clear that this is in preparation for Assyria. Why should the kings of Assyria come and find plenty of water, they said. Can you see that one okay? All right, this is tricky. If you can make it out here, this is the outline of a storage jar. One of the other things that we see in this buildup, once we see the regime change, we know that they started rationing things. These are what we call Lamella Jars, and we call them that because they all have this stamp on the handle. It's a very distinct type of jar with a seal, and it says Lamelech, meaning belonging to the king or for the king, and then it has a city name under it. This is something that we find all over at this time, and one of the theories is that this is a part of the preparations building up before this coming Assyrian siege. You can see another one. This one is like a winged sun disk, very typical ancient Near Eastern motif. This one is the winged scarab or beetle. So what happens at Lachish? We walked through our olive grove. We see this giant city. We know it's fortified. Well, let's talk about this a little bit. Because the thing about Lachish is that it's basically a second city to Jerusalem. You have Jerusalem as the main capital in the northern part of Judah. But in the slightly more south, you have Lachish. And this is what it looks like when it's not covered in grass. If we were to peel everything away, this is what's been excavated and preserved. So you can see the fortifications run around the outside in a double band. You actually have two sets of walls. There's this massive palace complex for the governor on the top, and you'll be able to see that in the pictures in a second. The gate is actually a long approach that runs up the side of it, which is great because even when you walk up tells today, you never walk straight up, right? You go along the side to make it easy and gradual. And it makes a sharp right turn, and then we have a chambered gate here, which is very typical of Judean architecture. So I want to zoom in on this and just think about from a strategic standpoint, this gate area a little bit. One of the reasons that they do this is for attacking armies, because you don't want to give them a straight shot, right? One of the best things you can do is make them have to turn the corner if they're all coming in. Have you ever watched a marching band try to turn a tight corner and how things, you got drums like running into each other? It's ugly. And that's part of the purpose of this, is to slow down the traffic as a defensive measure. This is what it looks like today. Some things have been slightly reconstructed. So we're looking up this path, standing, right around here, and looking up to the Gatehouse area, okay? You can see one fortification wall here. The second one would have been up top. This would be the Gatehouse structure, okay? At the gate, this is actually the lintel. This is where the doors would have shut against. You can see that it's worked stone. It's been cut in a certain way. And running right underneath that is actually the city sewer. So you can see this long channel coming down the bottom is the drainage that would come out the main gate. That's the one hole that you have in the wall. So you're going to control where your water and waste goes. This is standing inside the gate. Now, we mentioned the chambers. You can see a chamber here, and another chamber here. It's really overgrown. And then as soon as you come in, there's a streetway that runs this direction, okay? But the thing that you can't miss is this monstrosity in the background. And this is that palace that we talked about, okay? all standing till today. There are large pillar bases up there. It's remarkable. Because there's so much preserved there, we're able to do some reconstructions and say, this is more or less what it should look like. You can see our long approach that we looked at, the gatehouse area with that tight turn, the chambered gate, the street running up with the individual houses on either side, and then this large palace compound. Okay, double fortification walls, incredible buildup here, just in how steep the walls are. Okay, and then one more reconstruction. So this is what the state of Judah is leading in to this Assyrian crisis. We've got Jerusalem that's been built up. There's rationing going on. Lachish is this strong fortified city. Excellent gate, excellent walls, huge palace. But then we have problem, crisis. Hezekiah gets it in his mind to rebel. Now, what does rebellion actually mean at this point? It means that he no longer meets his financial obligation to the district, which is funny if you've been through credentialing, okay? He decides he's not going to pay anymore, okay? And that's normally what people do when they want to rebel against Assyria. You just stop paying the money, and they say, okay, we'll be there in 6 months. Be ready. So the Bible tells us in the 14th year of King Hezekiah, Sennacherib, king of Assyria, came up against all the fortified cities of Judah and took them. And Hezekiah, king of Judah, sent to the king of Assyria at Lachish, saying, I haven't done anything wrong. Withdraw from me. Whatever you impose on me, I'll bear. Trouble. And the king of Assyria required of Hezekiah, king of Judah, 300 talents of silver and 30 talents of gold. And Hezekiah gave him all the silver that was found in the house of the Lord and in the treasuries of the king's house. And at that time, Hezekiah stripped the gold from the doors of the temple of the Lord and from the doorpost that Hezekiah, king of Judah, had overlaid, and gave it to the king of Assyria. Okay, so here's the problem. You don't want to pay, you're going to rebel, and he comes and he's standing at your door, and you say, okay, now we're going to pay. But you end up stripping the temple. Not a good situation. Sennacherib writes his own account of this. So we just read the biblical account. In Sennacherib's annals, he says, and Hezekiah the Judean, who did not submit to my yoke, 46 of his strong cities, fortresses, and small cities around them, which were without number, by beaten ramps, remember that, and bringing battering rams, the assault of infantry, tunnels, breaches, and siege engines, I surrounded, I conquered. As for him, now this is talking about Hezekiah, like a caged bird within Jerusalem, his royal city, I shut him in. I raised up towers around him and the exit of the city gate of his city. I turned back and his city was subjugated. Okay, and then it goes on to talk about all the land that he conquers from them, he gives to the Philistines to govern. Okay, so now we're talking about in Israel, the land is key, right? This mistake is costly because not only are you losing all your fortified cities, not only have you stripped the temple to pay off this guy, now your land is being taken away from you and given to the people that you've been fighting with for 500 years to keep. So that's Sennacherib's side. That's his annals, but he also gives us something that we call display inscriptions. And if we were to reconstruct his palace at Nineveh, this is what we'd get. And actually, the British Museum has a beautiful room that I haven't been to, but Christopher was tempting me with. They've actually reconstructed these display panels, and it recounts the siege of Lachish. So this is what it looked like. You can see on the sides, it's flat art. It's like a giant stone comic strip. Not so funny for Judah. So what do these look like? I want to point out just a few things. We got, first at the top, what do you see up here? Trees. We see olive trees here, and we see grape clusters. So this is that's like the first, inclination. Do they really know what this place looked like, or is this just standard? We'll get to it, but they know what this place looks like. They draw the double fortification wall. They draw the shape of the tell. All the agricultural references are spot on. They had a reporter there. This is cool stuff. Okay, so we've got the agriculture. Then we've got the archers. That's to be expected, right? You'll see that these guys have a typical Assyrian pointy hat, and they have curly beards. Or normally, you can't really see it in this drawing, but they'll normally have like a curly beard. These guys are something different. These aren't archers. What are these? Slingers. But this isn't David and Goliath slinging overhead, is it? No, this is underhand. This is to get rocks up over the wall. So you see them swinging underhand, and you see their ammo here. Okay? There we go. So these are just a little bit bigger than a baseball. And when you dig these up, when you're in the field, so when you come dig with us this summer, these are so much fun to throw around because it's just it's a perfectly shaped rock. And this is what they were slinging up over the walls to get the guys that were fighting them. Okay, so that's the sling stones. Here's our archers. Closer view of them on the actual stone. You can see the curly beards on these guys. Very much Assyrian. Okay, so with this many archers lining up against the wall, one of the things that they find in huge numbers at Lachish are arrowheads. As you can see here, we have an assortment of bronze ones, but also a bone arrowhead. And a typical excavation square would be 5 meters or so. You could almost imagine it like the size of this screen. And in a piece of the wall this big, they're finding hundreds of these. So this is where our Lord of the Rings stuff starts to come in, okay? Start painting that picture, because it's about to get real. This is Sennacherib's picture of the siege, okay? We can see a lot here. It's like Where's Waldo, Assyrian edition. We have Judeans up on towers. We have guys coming at them with battering rams in the siege towers. More archers. We have these ramps coming up, okay? What else do we have? We have some guys down here being punished severely. And we'll talk about that in a second. So this is a reconstruction. I mean, you get what a siege ramp is and a siege engine, right? You've seen it in the movies. This is what the Assyrians are claiming to have done. They claim it in the text, and then they claim it in their display panels. Here you can see underneath the siege engine a ramp of some sort, okay? This is where it gets really cool. If you go to Lachish today, the ramp is still there. It doesn't look like much. This grid shape on it is actually the sandbags that they've laid down as they're excavating. But this was the excavation of the ramp. And it's a giant, stone and dirt core ramp that goes up to the side of the fortifications. The funny thing is, and I couldn't find a good picture of it, but the inside, the Judeans don't just take it. They start building a counter ramp on the inside and refortifying and thickening up because it takes a while to do this, right? And you can't really shoot the guys that are doing it because they're probably captured Judeans, that are being slave labor to build it. So it takes a while to do this, so they reinforce the inside. But this is along the area where they excavated all those arrowheads, up against the wall. So it's just, you have to imagine this. This is Lord of the Rings. Here's another picture from today. You can see the huge ramp cutting up the side. More siege engines. I love that the blocks that always fall down are just these little squares. It's like destroying a Tetris building or something. Somehow squares are what fall off. And the Judeans, of course, are very worried. Now, for you guys that are in the front, I don't know if you can see this well. Maybe people in the back can see it better. Can you tell what this is? I thought I heard it. I'll give you a hint. These are bronze. They're metal loops. This is actually a chain. Why are we looking at a chain? Like, what? We dig this up. Great. Tell me something new, Eric. Okay. What I want you to see is these guys, the Judeans on the wall with their chain. And what they're doing is they're trying to loop the battering ram and pull it up. Because if you change the angle, it's no longer effective, right? So this is really cool because in the display inscriptions, we have the picture of the chains, and then we actually have a few of these links that we never would have known otherwise. And of course, you can see the Assyrian counter guys trying to pull it down and like, give us our siege engine back. We need our battering ram. Okay? So that's the chain. That's really cool. We've got more Tetris guys down here. What are they doing? They're actually trying to undermine the wall. When we read that inscription by Sennacherib, it said he used the battering rams, right? He used the ramps, but then he used tunnels and breaches. This is a typical ancient Near Eastern way of attacking. If you can dig underneath a wall and set a fire, you have a pretty good chance of making a weak point and collapsing it. So these guys are digging the hole, and these two guys that look like they're dancing are actually the guys going in to undermine it. Okay, this is sad. An unfortunate part of war is that people are captured and killed. There are other parts of these reliefs that show, arms being cut off, men being stretched and cut up by the Assyrians. Here we see the Judeans impaled on sticks. Which one can you see it on there? Okay, I like to call these guys Lachish kebabs. This is sad, okay? But this is typical. They describe this in the text. They say, I impaled their guys, I flayed their guys, and this is a sign of intimidation, right? You look out and you see your buddies hanging on a stick. It's not really good. This is one of the mass graves from Lachish. These are all skulls, if you can see, okay? So this picture of warfare really starts to come through, right? You don't get this in Lord of the Rings, okay? This is heavy stuff. And so this is what happens when Judah sells out and compromises. 30 years later, the consequences really catch up. Okay? This is a cute break now to get rid of that. This is my daughter, Neva. And this is what happens when your dad's an archaeologist. You process every find and document it. Okay? So the question is, and that was comic relief to get rid of the skulls. So what? Why do we actually care about an attack like this? Okay, first, it really provides a lot of historical background to biblical texts. Okay, we can look at Micah. This morning in hermeneutics, we talked about the book of Zephaniah and how this can factor in. For Kings, and this is really huge because we've got Hezekiah stripping down the temple, and basically, it's an alliance. Everybody else is saying, let's not get under their yoke, and he's saying, kind of fudges it a little, right? And it becomes a problem, and it ultimately costs Judah the land. And really, apart from the biblical side, for the scientific or cultural side, this whole attack establishes an archaeological benchmark, and it helps us date other sites, and I'll talk about that in a second. I mentioned Micah. Micah's an 8th century prophet, right around, technically 7th if we're talking about this, but he gives this list. Tell it not in Gath, weep not at all, and Beth Ophrah, roll in the dust. Pass on in nakedness and shame, you who live in Shafir. And he goes on, and we see Zanaan, Beth Ezel, Marot. This is a list of these cities that were most likely destroyed during this time, okay? So this is something that's alive and active. When we talk about the book of Zephaniah, I didn't pull in the whole text here, but the whole opening of Zephaniah is against the Philistines. If you start in chapter 2, you can see how Zephaniah just comes out and blasts the Philistines for having taken the land, but it tells a story of restoration, that there's coming a day when Yahweh will give the land back, that Judah will inhabit the coast. So this is something that's very much active and alive in these people's mind. They've lost their land, and it has an impact. So that's one reason why this is really important. It helps us understand prophetic material. It helps us understand the historical material of more than just the text that mentioned Sennacherib, okay? This map, we're back to our tribes. I want to talk about one site specifically. We're going to talk a lot about it tomorrow when you're here. You're coming, right? Okay. We're going to talk about the city of Gath. Gath is one of the 5 Philistine cities. This is where I excavate in the summer. The funny thing, and we'll talk about it tomorrow, is that at a certain point, Gath is no longer Philistine. It becomes Judean. Here it is. You can see it's in that same kind of zone, right on the border, the Shvela, these rolling hills. It's actually the first hill. If you look one direction, it's flat. It looks like Kansas all the way to the ocean, or to the Mediterranean. On a clear day, you can actually see it. If you turn around the other way, it's just rolling hills. It's gorgeous. But in that spot, eventually Judah gains control of it in the 8th century. And what happens is come 701, it's destroyed. So where we're going to go is up here to the top. This is Area F. This is my home. I dream about this place. There's a nice cool breeze. We have watermelon for fruit break. You should all come and dig with us. It's great, okay? There's a theme emerging here. Come back tomorrow, you'll get more. And what we see at Area F at Gath is a lot of this pottery. Now, I said that it creates an archaeological benchmark, this destruction at Lachish. Archaeologists love destruction. Not just because of the Lord of the Rings factor, where it's like, yeah, cool, burn stuff. That part's cool. But when that happens, it creates a snapshot. All these walls come falling in, and everything is sealed. And what it does is it gives us a perfect glimpse at a cultural horizon for any given period that's been destroyed. So what's happened at Lachish is that all of these pottery forms that are really undergoing a lot of change in the 8th and 7th century are frozen for us. And now when we go and we dig up sites and we're trying to figure out what they are, you'll hear archaeologists say, oh, that's Lachish 3, that's Lachish 2, instead of 8th century, 7th century. We almost date these, the names have become synonymous with the periods, okay? So this is the Lukesh pottery. The one I'm going to point out to you, okay, there's the Lamella jar that we talked about earlier, but down here there's a cooking pot, little squatty guy, a couple of these baby juglets. Remember these, okay? So when we go to Tel Asafi, when we go to Gath, here you can actually see the destruction layer. Brown dirt here, right? See the darker stuff here? That's what happens when we get destruction. We get layers of ash, we get darker soils, we get broken up mud brick all fallen in, and then we get the pottery. So once you get into this destruction stuff, you know you're getting into the good stuff and you get really excited. So in the middle of this 8th century level, we get the destruction, and this is what we start to find. This is that little pot that I just showed you from Lachish. It looks identical. And I could hear them celebrating when they dug it up. I didn't know. This was early on in my career. I didn't know what the pottery meant. They're like, this is Lachish 3. This is Lachish. I'm like, we're at Safi. What's going on? We're able to actually talk about the 8th century at Tel Asafi now because of this pottery. So here's the cooking pot. Here's a lamp that's very typical of what we would find at Lachish. Here are all the store jars together. And this stuff lines up side by side with what we find at Lachish. It's really great. We talked about the Lamella stamps, right? So here's our fearless leader, Aaron Mayer, excellent guy, and you'll get to know him this summer when you're there with us. Here's that stamped handle, right? Now the sad part is that Aaron is actually sitting on the edge of our excavation area at the top of that cliff I just showed you. In Area F. The problem is that he found this back here wandering around. He was just going for a walk, looking around. You always look at stuff that's on the ground, and he picked it up. And this is huge because we knew they found these back in like 1899 when Bliss and McAllister were at the site. So we knew they existed, but we'd never actually found one in the modern excavations. And unfortunately, this one wasn't in a context. It was just on the surface. But we know now, here's another one of these hallmarks of this 8th century period. Okay? So what I really want to get at today is that this 701 event represents a critical turning point in Judah's history. When we're reading the prophetic material, everything after this point is almost in light of it. Judah has compromised, the land has been lost. They've lost their economic center almost, okay? So this is really critical for Judah. The Bible, archaeology, and ancient Near Eastern texts, we've looked at all those today, right? We looked at Kings and Chronicles. We looked at the material remains from Lachish. And then we read Sennacherib's texts and looked at his pictures. And all of these represent a unique voice on this, right? And when you put them all together, a great composite picture emerges. And we get a fuller sense of what's going on here. And then really, we've already talked about this a lot, but this really is helping us understand these texts outside of those that strictly mention the historical acts. And that's a big thing for this. When we do biblical archaeology, a lot of people think, you're going and you're finding Goliath? Like, is that what you're looking for? You're going to find me Goliath's head? I hope so. But, you're going to find the Ark of the Covenant. It's not like that. A lot of times, what we can actually do is understand the biblical text as a whole better. We can reconstruct this world, and that way when we do have a specific mention of something, let's say we have Hezekiah and Sennacherib's interaction, we can put it against the backdrop of this whole picture we've reconstructed and say, yes, the Bible does in fact hold up very nicely against all the sources, okay? So there's something very encouraging to be taken from that.